Hey everyone, welcome to the show, episode 42, World War II, Prisoners of War, Australian Football League. So today's show is going to be about World War II and how the prisoners of war from Australia and all Australians that were part of that, how they started a football league, the season that they did overseas, and how they made a makeshift Brownlow Medal, and how they all competed and survived such toughness and conditions. And it's a story I didn't know much about. I haven't heard of it. Till obviously I did a bit of research. I knew about the podcast I just did with Bob Quinn. So a World War II hero from Australia. Check it out. It's definitely worth a listen to. But yeah, I come across some more information and I found out about this league that was formed. It's one of the first few games played on overseas soil as an actual league. And it's not something that we really know about in this modern day. So I'm going to try and do my best to talk about it. And I know those who went through this experience after trying to defend this great nation and try to do a bit of honour talking about it. And yeah, it's quite a interesting story. So I'm going to start with where the first camp for the POWs were, and it was in Chiangai during World War II. It was Singapore's main notorious POW camp, where tens of thousands of Allied prisoners, especially Australians, captured in the fall of Singapore. They suffered brutal conditions like forced labour, building railways for the Burma Railway, disease, starvation, so this was under Japanese occupation. Though it was fostered as a remarkable resilience and also education, where they formed Chiangai University, so the POWs actually formed the university and tried to teach each other while they were prisoners. And also faith monuments like the Chiangai Chapel as remaining powerful symbols to today. So yeah, it was essentially a POW hub established by the Japanese in 1942. That was in February of that year. It served as one of the largest or the largest POW camp in Southeast Asia. And it was a transit point and a staging ground for the forced labour units sent across the region. So yeah, that was like the hub that they had for that area through the imprisonment of being a POW. So yeah, they experienced forced labour. Prisoners were used in dangerous works, including road and railway construction, like the Burma Railway, mine clearing and factory work. So yeah, it led to quite high death rates. The conditions were very poor. The prisoners faced severe malnutrition, malaria, just brutal treatment overall, which in the camp, but also seeing a lot of acts of incredible bravery and resilience. So yeah, despite suffering, the prisoners created a vibrant community, establishing a Chiangai University for education, developing medical facilities, and building spiritual spaces like the Chiangai Chapel. So the British troops were liberated on Chiangai in September 5th, 1945. And yeah, so essentially that'd be the same time I think everyone was released and liberated from those prisons and being a prisoner of war. So I just needed to briefly talk about that because this is where the Australian Football League was played. And also it was also played in Stalag 383, so that was in Germany. So there's prisoners of war, obviously, that were Australian. So it was a camp near Nuremberg during the Second World War too. So yeah, there's sort of two leagues that were made, obviously one in Europe and one in Asia. So yeah, just wanted to quickly touch base on that. I'm just going to quickly say what happened in the Stalag League, or 383 League. So teams of the league consisted by 4 teams: kangaroos, emus, kookaburras and wallabies, obviously Australian iconic animals. The competition was ran with a formal VFL Victorian League So like rules, so the rules that were incorporated in that league, which included umpires, charge reports, and also independent 3-man tribunals. So they actually had a tribunal system. The games were played under challenging conditions, including irregular playing surfaces, ill-fitting boots, poor diet that affected athletic standpoints and stamina. The group portrays teams such as the Kangaroos that were the premiers that were taken and preserved copies held by the Australian War Memorial. So that just quickly brief touches about that. The initiative was a key part of maintaining morale and sense of home for the Australian non-commissioned officers housed at the Stalag of 383. So the Australian War Memorial holds various photos and records related to the sporting events, including the Empire Games staged at camp in 1943 and 1944. So it's just a brief one of the league there. And then it was more of a, we had a very big presence in World War II across Asia, obviously from Japan to Australia. So there was a lot of people that were prisoners of war within Southeast Asia, as I just mentioned. And we're going to just talk about the story behind in Chiangai. So that was in Germany. Now we're going to talk about Chiangai. Australian rules football and Chiangai, the 8th division of the AIF in World War II. So that's just a bit of the headline there. So the sporting interests and the competitions began with soccer, cricket, followed by rugby, basketball, volleyball, golf, and even swimming. So they did a quite extensive amount of sport within the POW camps. And then, obviously, we're very proud of our football. So Australian rules football come along. And it was, obviously excluded the British, who were greatly outnumbered the Australians, because obviously there's a lot more British, but they're also a part of the POWs. So it was an opportunity for the Australians to show that they were more rugged and agile than their British counterparts. It's obviously a very sporting rival, obviously with the cricket going on at the moment with the Ashes. But with most of the sporting codes already underway at Chiangai, the 8th division, the Australian rules, heavies, the heavy hitters, folks, knew that it could not afford any mishaps with the events, with 36 disgruntled, incarcerated, possibly out of the control of, a lot of young men that were sort of, low on morale. So they were given a chance to offer a way of playing some sport. But obviously there was a concern there would be an all-out brawl occurring with the guards intervening with weapons, so that was very strict, obviously. But there were 4 prisoners with top sporting experience got together. The 1933 Brownlow medalist Wilfred Chicken Smallhorn, Ben Barnett, former Test cricketer, Les Green, the 2nd/9th Field Ambulance, and Royal Charles Fox, the 13th AGH, and the footballer Peter Chitty. I think Peter Chitty was a St Kilda player. We'll get into that as we get further down. So they were consultants, and the men knew the Australian rules to be a fierce contact sport, with each state playing at different levels. Victoria's played more rugged in muddy conditions, and Western Australia's played fast on a dry track. Rules would have to be modified and enforced. So yeah, there you go. So they played a bit different style of play then. And South Australia is probably somewhat in between both of those blends of play. So that explains that. So yeah, there's photos here, obviously, of former Test cricketer Ben Barrett at Chiangai. He was a wicket-keeper and a left-handed batsman, and prominent in organising the Test matches as well. So a bit of cricket history there too. So more than 600 men registered interest in teams were formed. So 600 men wanted to play football. With the names of Melbourne clubs Carlton, Collingwood, Essendon, Geelong, St Kilda, Melbourne and Richmond. So, yeah. They would come from hospitals, the rest from Silang, and each team would have 30 players with 20 men in reserves, making a total of 200 registered players, with each team fielding 18 players with one reserve, so one reserve on the bench. 3 matches were played every week on Wednesdays and Saturdays. 2 games being played on the one of those days, being a former British military barracks. There were only cricket and rugby fields, so the Australians had to work hard to create a football oval, or a footy oval, which they carved an area out in essentially no man's land between Silang and the Roberts Hospital. And also the goals and the point posts were made from rubber trees. They made footballs from balls they purchased from Chinese traders and modified the old boot leather and used wild boar bladders, which the game required footballs which would respond to being bounced on the run, and also umpires bouncing the ball, as I've talked about in the Centre Bounce podcast. For the uniforms, they commissioned a local Singapore seamstress to sew 250 pairs of shorts and tops in the 6 team colours. The matches were played and taken very seriously, and in consideration the conditions, the standard of play was to be commended. It was run like the VFL, with umpires given control. Obviously, charges report, so that's like being reported, which is heard by a 3 independent man tribunal. So, like just I mentioned with the other league too, that was in Germany. There was rules for players, transfers from club to club, and payment, and also were usually by food. So yeah, like rice rations. They're a prisoner of war, and that was the only way they could pay each other. So we'll get into that in a bit more depth and detail. The 2nd fourth soldier Lou Daly would play for Geelong, and keen to win the season. With a few other Geelong players, they approached Peter Chitty to transfer from the hospital teams of Melbourne or Richmond to Geelong. It took some time for Chitty's stand 3 bowls of rice, the offer to the captain of the team, which meant Lou Daly had to stand down. So essentially the 3 bowls of rice. So as you could imagine how hard the conditions were, that this man was happy just to do it for 3 bowls of rice. So like you think about today's modern day, players making transfers now, and like you look at the free agency, say the $1.7 million deal with De Koning, this man just did it for 3 bowls of rice. So it makes you feel really appreciated for what you have today. So yeah, this was Chiangai's style of Australian rules football. The first match was on Saturday of the 15th of August in 1942 between Essendon and Carlton. It drew a crowd of 3,000 men, which included amputees and also the sick from the hospital. The Japanese increased the number of guards because the game was outside of the perimeter, which they set up a machine gun. So they had machine guns pointed onto the oval. They obviously had it very well controlled. A lot of guards that would have had weapons, so that obviously the prisoners had no weapons. They were unarmed. So you could imagine the security personnel around that oval. Chicken Smallhorn was the umpire and would need to keep a tight rein on the game. A Carlton player was concussed in the first minute of the game and had to be carried off. So obviously football's a quite tough game. Could you imagine these guys haven't been able to play football? They're stuck. They're prisoners of war. They just want to get out in the field. It's very physical. So it was hard fought, close match which Carlton won. At the end of the game, bets were settled and the bookies had been busy. So they still took bets in the crowd. 2 footy matches per week assisted with establishing a routine in the camp. It gave the players a focus. Champions Peter Shitty and Lou Daly instilled into the teams the importance of teamwork. This teamwork and selflessness was not lost on the spectators in their day-to-day routines as POWs and the misery of prisoner life and the ever-increasing amount of disease and malnutrition. Geelong, with the players Shitty and Daly, made their first appearance playing Melbourne on Wednesday, 19th August, when the crowd was estimated to be around 5,000. Chitty, who had been in strict training for weeks, was outstanding and would have earned himself 3 Brownlow points. So, yeah, they will essentially establish a Brownlow Medal, count the Chiangai Brownlow. We'll get into that in a sec. So, the grand final between Carlton and Richmond was held on Wednesday, 17th October 1942, attended by a large and noisy crowd, including the usual hecklers, with the majority of bets on Carlton. The level of seriousness of the game was recorded by the reporter and the Australian Rules Corp. Alexander Cyril Orthorson, 13 AGH. His account of the game, he reported, it was played like a battle with considerable aggression from both sides, with coordinated attacks resulting in aggressive counterattacks, with players using all their physical strength and traits. The lead changed several times until Richmond finally won, 10 goals 9, 69, to Carlton's 6 goals 8, 44. So obviously 10 goals and 9 behinds, which equaled 69 points, to Carlton's 6 goals 8 behinds, 44 points. So that's how we do our scoring system still to today. The grand final had been held and played with a level of aggression and tenacity the Australian troops had been able to use in battle, because their commanders ordered retreat after retreat when facing Japanese attempts to outflank them. The Australians in the camp felt they had no real chance to prove their worth during the battle. Perhaps providing and proving if they had been better led, they would have had been a better fighting men. So a bit of, a bit of feeling there, a bit of feeling like they were let down by the leaders, and they were put in a position where they didn't want to be a prisoner of war. So I really feel for those troops, and very interesting story. So with the game proving to be popular amongst the POWs, the game continued on after the grand final. It was vital in keeping up morale amongst the prisoners. But on 19th of January 1943, footy was banned because of the high alarming numbers of injuries. The level of rough play resulted in Australian rules joining rugby union and rugby league being banned by the hospitals authorities for the level of violent play. So they obviously played just not Australian football, they played Australian rugby union, or rugby union and rugby league. So they're obviously sports, they're also big in Australia. The POW diet was having a huge effect on the men's physical condition and bone structure. The lack of nutrition was depleting the muscle strength, with bones less protected and much more brittle. Chitty was rare with his makeup of his body. He was one of the only few players who did not sustain injury or lose any weight. He was also running every evening, so just, crazy sort of genetics there that he, was that, didn't lose too much weight, and it would have been hard because the person that maybe got more rash, like played well, got rewarded well, and probably ate better. So that may have had a bit to do with it. It's quite sad because you look at all the ways that we have now to you look at all the effort that the players are going through pre-season at the moment. Just for example, they they have all the luxuries of, they don't have to work. First and foremost, their work is going to the gym every day, or whichever day they are, and the days in between running. Obviously, they're not going to be in the gym every day, but they may be doing different parts of the body every day, or they may be running in between. So they might run one day, and there might be no weights. Every club does it a bit different, and every player is at a different position in their career. And some may want to be getting more fit, but yeah, generally they're in the gym quite a bit, and they'd have their rest days in between. So, but that being said, these guys, they are prisoners of war. They're essentially just getting fed, and they're just, malnutrition. They're working. Their mates are dying. They're starving. They've been flogged, working hard, they're forced labor. They're stuck essentially. So it's very hard conditions. So the Australian officers discussed the physical issue with the football codes. Rugby and soccer had to be stopped. Australian rules went on but finished by the end of 42. Long before the end of season was planned, Geelong was undefeated with the one more win than Richmond, and was announced a premiership winner. So the Football Association had an emergency meeting acknowledging the competition was over and unresolved. They emerged with a proposal to play 2 representative games in January of 1943 to end the Australian rules at Chiangai forever. After a long chat about this and deliberation, the Australian officers agreed to their proposal. There would be a 15-man side game between AGH staff and Suralong POWs. On Friday of the 22nd of January, 2 days later, the biggest game of the season was played between Victoria and the rest of Australia. So obviously players from the other states and territories. So just if you were to look at what we used to do a couple of years ago, or over a decade ago, would have the All-Stars versus the Victorians. Essentially, this would be that sort of game, but made up of, a blend of everyone that was a prisoner of war from the camps. So every fit player who wanted to play the last match registered with Shanghai Australian Football Association. So that was what it was called. The 2 panels sat down all on the day of the 15th of January 1943 to make selections. Chitty was selected as captain of Victoria, and Lou Daly, who played for Geelong in the VFL, and Subiaco was made skipper of the rest. So he was a skipper of essentially the All-Stars, but also the rest of Australia. That's what they're called. Shitty, who remained super fit, played both final games. He paced himself well. The Selang team against AGH team in front of 5,000 spectators. The AGH team won 9 goals 5, 59 points against Selang 8 goals 8, equaling 56 points. So yeah, quite a close game, only won by 3 points. So it was the first Shanghai Rules game Chitty wasn't named amongst the best of the players. On the evening of 23rd of January 1943, Smallhorn and Fox counted the Brownlow votes in a barracks room behind closed doors. So yeah, they made a Brownlow Medal and they casted votes. So they were counting them. Lou Daly polled well consistently with 13 votes, and Chitty with 24 votes was the clear winner of the Shanghai Brownlow Medal. Smallhorn soon fell ill and was hospitalised. Staff advised him not to be running around in the heat. The following day, the umpire to the Heat following day to umpire the big game. Fox himself had not felt the greatest after the first game. Both men had run long distances, and down the footy field, Fox would have to stand in for Smallhorn. So yeah, a bit of obviously must have been hard. These guys just were not, they were malnourished. They weren't well. So Sunday the 24th January saw a slight breeze arrive an hour before the match started, but nearly enough to provide relief for the thousands of spectators who began the show. A band played welcome to spectators, and bookies worked their way through the crowd, shouting out the odds to the crowd and picking up bets on the winning team and the winners of the best and fairest of the match. So the little borehole trophy and the best and fairest for Victoria, the Doug McQueen trophy. There were also wagers on who would kick the first and last goals. So there you go. That sort of happens today. So you could put bets on the first goal, but I don't think we have last goal. I'm not a big bettor, so I wouldn't know about that. And it's not something I'm it's up to you if you like doing that stuff. But yeah, it's not my sort of cup of tea. Sorry. So yeah, the big money was on the Brownlow, and the bookies were sweating. The gambling currency included clothes, daily rice, rations, money, wallets, and watches. So that's what these guys were playing for. They weren't even playing for money. They were prisoners of war. They essentially for clothes, daily rice rations. So could you imagine, like, you're just playing for food to survive? So yeah, money, but obviously you don't have much money when you're a prisoner of war. Wallets and watches, so items like those sorts of things would have been important. And yeah, what money you would have had, you would have put in the wallet, and what watch you would have had to just check the times in those times. We didn't have mobile phones like we got now. You can just check the phone for your time, and etc. So Smallhorn defied the doctors and took painkillers, and turned up to the match dressed in white. He walked out onto the hard surface, flanked by the boundary and the goal umpires, to a roaring cheer from the crowd. The Victorians wore a dark blue top with a white V and a white trousers, and the rest wore a white singlet with a red V. As I mentioned, Daly captained the rest, and yeah, the game between the two teams was intense. It led to a see-swing affair until the final siren. The Victorians won 14 goals, 93 points. To the rest, 10 goals, 65 points. So a bit of, obviously done quite well. The Victorians winning. So the Doug McQueen Trophy for the best and fairest for Victoria was donated by Lieutenant Douglas MacDonald McQueen, the 2nd and 29th former Victorian Football Association player for Coburg. He was also a player in the Victorian team. He was also awarded the 26-year-old warrant officer, the second class John Thomas Jack Haig, the 2nd of the 29th, battalion. So the little borehole trophy was donated by Corporal J. Little, the Australian Army Corps, for the best and fairest player for the rest. It was awarded to Lou Daly. This was the last Australian rules match played at Chiangai. Many of the POWs were about to be sent from Singapore to other work places, or work parties as they mention here. Their health and stamina would never be the same. Whilst they were POWs, by far Australian rules was more... Whilst they were POWs, by far Australian rules football was the most popular sport amongst the Australian POWs. So football was the sport and was held in high regard for the POWs of Australia. It means asserting their masculinity and also the nationalism for their country and pride. So that's what was mentioned, and obviously they were proud of their country, and that's the part that was mentioned. So yeah, that covers the last of that. Also, the Brownlow Medal winner, the Chiangai Brownlow Medal, Chiangai Australian Football Rules Association League, and that covers that one for the episode. So they had it very hard. It's a sad situation, and no one wants to be a prisoner of war, especially during those times. They have certain rules and regulations, like the Geneva Convention, that made international laws and all that sort of stuff. That was created. To help establish international laws. I'm just bringing that up now. So what year that was made? So yeah, the Geneva Conventions are core international treaties of international humanitarian law that serve the further rules limiting the brutality in armed conflicts, protecting those that are non-fighting civilians and medics, or no longer fighting wounded POWs, which was the main 1949 conventions. So ensuring the two additional protocols were in 1977. So so you got to remember these were before those sort of times. And yeah, it's very sad. War is a very sad thing. Sad thing what these soldiers went through, and being a prisoner of war, and everything that goes with that. But through the hardship and things like that, they built a university. They had hardship and wanted to build morale by playing football, Australian rules football, obviously other sports, but Australian rules football was the most popular sport amongst the POWs. It just shows you how much they respect their country and how hard it would have been. There's not much I can add to that. It's a pretty serious thing, and I wanted to bring this podcast today because I personally didn't know about it. It's not a thing that's talked about much, and it's a hard one. And I wanted to talk about it today because not many people know about it. It's a pretty serious one, and essentially it's the first time we've played a proper full league season overseas. We played some games in China, like my team, Adelaide, went over and played Gold Coast. We played, in America and probably in England too over the years. But this was the first time a full proper league with a full voting system, a tribunal system to have, like if you've been reported, or charges as they called it back then. But yeah, former Brownlow medalist is amongst that. We'll talk a bit about him in the next podcast. We're going to talk about a few Brownlow medalists that went to war and served. But today was about the POWs who built up a football league, Australian football rules, league, overseas, in the hardship of being a prisoner of war. So this episode was dedicated to them. I hope I did it justice. It's quite a serious episode, and something that I just wanted to talk about and share, because a lot of young people do not know about this. It's part of history, what they went through. It's not easy. So thank you, everyone. I hope you learnt something today. It's a serious one, and talking about this stuff, and also through the world wars, it is an honour to do so. I hope I've done it justice. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone that serves. Thank you everyone that serves today. Please have a great afternoon. We'll talk about the Brownlow medalist next that served in war. He's a 3-time Brownlow medalist, 3-time Sandover medalist. He's also a Adelaide Premiership player. So please have a great day. We'll talk about that podcast next. Cheers. Thank you.